There we go. One participant. Right, so greetings. So welcome to our Solstice Peace Festival in commemoration of the time of year and the struggle that's going on the planet. There's a lot of people in trouble. There's a lot of conflict. You know, we're all in this global pandemic situation. Nobody quite knows the origin of this. Is so much concern. People's lives are devastated. So it's really, I'm really pleased to welcome to our meeting Peter Marshall. If anyone can sort out what's going on, I'm sure he can. He's a great historian.
Not about that.
And a sort of researcher. He's a freelance writer, member of the Society of Authors, and he's published a consistent, very, you know, heavyweight series of studies. You know, a history of anarchism, demanding the impossible, studies of William Godwin, the great British philosopher, and also a study of Celts and Druids who were connected. So what are you working on at the moment, Peter?
Well, at the moment, I've done altogether about 17 books. I'm now doing in a way, it's my swan song. I'm doing the second part of my memoirs. But I still carry on interest through the website, my website, about what's happening in the world, and so I'm very much delighted to be with you on this great day of festival of the Midsummer.
Right.
It's pouring with rain here, but it's nice tonight. It's not too bad now. I don't think.
And when will your memoirs be ready? Is this what?
I've written one, actually, the first part, which is called Bognor Boy.
Yes.
Why I became an anarchist. That's really published. And but the second part, I haven't decided on title yet, but it brings it up to date. The first part is only up to about when I was 20 years old.
Oh, right.
Though quite a lot happened then. And then since then, obviously it has happened in my life. I mean, I'm coming up to 75 as an old codger, but but the still causing a certain amount of trouble. And it's lovely to be by the sea. We've just moved recently to live by the sea,
right?
And I can go rowing out over there. And I hope to go to Greece in the autumn to join my yacht with Liz, my companion, and we've done a study earlier. Just the last book for this Bognor Boy was called Poseidon's Realm, Voyage Around the Aegean. Very much looking at the ancient Greeks and calling it the major ancient sites, including in Crete as well. So that was very interesting. So, and before that, I actually, with the boat, I sailed from Scotland down to Malta, looking at all the great megalithic sites.
Yeah.
And I call that book, including Stonehenge, I call that book Europe's Lost Civilization, exploring the mysteries of the megaliths.
Yes.
And I think they're much more important than most people think. Not only a source of ancient wisdom, but the very, particularly in the Neolithic, the Stone Age, they weren't defended. There's no sign of fighting. So it's fairly plentiful and peaceful. And they also had communal burials, so it implies there's quite a communal society. And then, of course, Bronze Age, later Bronze Age, and Iron Age. The Iron Age was great for Druids, but it was no less they were fighting. And they started building these iron forts, and they then had individual burials when leaders emerged.
Yeah.
But the fact that megaliths lost that period of great megalith building, but even before that human beings have lived in peace and plenty and without war, and there's a communal life. And there's no reason why that couldn't happen again. There's nothing innate in human beings, in human nature.
That's a very good point to make there. And yes, I have read that amazing book about your you might be interested in the following bit of information. I don't think I've told you this. I've recently recontacted a group called the International Delphic Council.
Yes.
Delphic Council are restarting the Delphic Games,
Oh,
which,
very good. Yeah.
which were the balance to the Olympic Games, which were
Yes.
the stressing physical prowess, and
Yeah.
the Delphic Games were for the arts, for culture, and for poetry, and
Right.
we are hoping to have them restarted in Delphi in the next couple of years. There's an international body
Yeah.
based in Berlin, and I'm in touch with them. I'm an advisor
Wonderful.
to the council. So I'd like to officially invite you to sail your yacht down to Delphi.
Delphi.
Come and read some poetry, participate in the revised Delphic Games.
Great. Well, very much. I mean, it's very much a wonderful place, Delphi. I've been there. We're lucky enough to go there when the Olympic Games on last time round in Greece, and there's nobody there, so we could actually make the full benefit of our visit.
Right.
There's something in the atmosphere there, which is very, very creative and very poetic and very very profound.
Well, they say that Delphi was dedicated to Apollo.
Yes.
And Apollo, the Greek writers said Stonehenge was also dedicated to Apollo.
Yeah.
There's a congruence, the god of light, Luch, in the Celtic world, or Bel.
Yeah. Yes.
Apollo, I think, were equatorial. So
Yeah.
the Greeks and the Celts worship the same sun god, whose festival we celebrate now for peace.
That's wonderful, because I went up to the temple of Apollo, which was the center of Delphi.
Yeah.
And of course, they made the various oracles. And it's not clear whether it was a certain fumes going through the earth, or certain drugs, or just a visionary people, women who made these very, very important statements, which the ancient Greeks acted upon.
Yeah.
So it's a very special place.
Yeah. Well, they were like the Druidesses of Greece. The Druids were Partes or seers of the Celtic world. In Apollo's oracle at Delphi, and also he had other oracles, Didyma in the coast of Turkey, which I've been to.
Which I've also visited.
Yeah, Didyma is also quite splendid.
And a wonderful place, yeah.
Yeah. So well, there's another link, you see. You've been connecting the dots time. That's brilliant.
Well, so, I feel this there's ancient wisdom which comes obviously through the Druids, through a lot of indigenous societies. And particularly in I think in Crete, and very much so in ancient Greece, in the Delphi. Yeah,
no, with the same culture and civilization. I went to the museum at Mycenae. Obviously, I've been to Mycenae, and they have gold work, very fine engraving on gold, incredibly detailed work. These are lozenge-shaped or spiral.
Yes.
And it's identical to the gold work you find in the ancient Irish civilizations at Newgrange.
Yes.
That they're all in the National Museum in Dublin. I looked at the artwork of the Celts in gold in Dublin, and the ones in Mycenae, and they're absolutely identical. And also of Wessex culture in Stonehenge, it's the same techniques. So they were obviously sailing around, visiting each other, learning their craft.
Exactly. I can't remember his name, but there's a great famous Greek sailor came up to the north.
Yeah.
He called in the west of England, in fact in Cornwall, and he said highly civilized here, where they are the great megaliths down that part in Penwith, down in that part of Cornwall.
Right.
And that's that's because the people who raised some of these great monuments to the sky were indeed very civilized in that sense, in the sense of understanding the great rhythms of nature.
Yes, and I think they shared a common reverence of the goddess, these cultures. Before, Gaia was also the goddess at Delphi. She represents the earth goddess, the kind of rhythms of nature, as you call it. And the Celts also worshipped her. I mean, these monuments, like Stonehenge, they were for the gods, but also the goddess was celebrated. And I think men and women lived in harmony. And, so what today's Druid and pagan communities are trying to do is revive that. And there's a lot of resistance to military capitalism, which is, it has a whole different agenda. You know, it seems to want us to have perpetual wars. I listened to an interview with Putin last night. He gave an hour-long interview about Russia's role in geopolitics. Met Biden. And of course, the G7 summit, we're all meeting in Cornwall.
Yes.
But I don't really think they understand fully what humanity needs at this time.
No.
How, if you'd have been invited to the G7 summit as an anarchist of the West Country, what would you have said to them?
Well, I would have said we actually don't need your governments, your state to organize us. We can organize ourselves. And I think we would organize ourselves in a much more peaceful and loving way. Unfortunately, people are have been so indoctrinated to think they have to be leaders and have to be led, not leaders. They have to be leaders, but have to be led. And that's, I suppose, my life has been trying to expose that myth of and just to show that people are great, whatever their education. They in fact are they're great poets. They're great thinkers. They can create communities for themselves. And often these governments and states interfere with society and prevent this coming through. And particularly, if you look at the Stonehenge, having mentioned Stonehenge, it's not defended. And there's no clear evidence of any serious fighting going on when it was first built. And so this military expense from capitalism is absurd. And all these very nation states, which and there's great rise of populism and nationalism and xenophobia, which we can see these leaders encouraging to a large extent, has dire results, as you know.
Yeah.
So I always say to them, enjoy the sunshine, enjoy the beach, go swimming, and don't try and organize us, mate.
Yeah, and what
organize ourselves.
What would you say about their combined military forces? Because the combined military spends more money than any other thing on Earth, and it uses more energy. It's causing climate change and resource depletion.
Yes.
I mean, what would you say if you put in charge of the combined military? Would you?
I would dissolve them, and I think that any military expenditure is really like digging a great big hole in the earth and pouring money into it, or not just money, but people's productivity, people's energy, work, and then filling in the hole because it's obsolete in a few years' time. And it's a massive waste, and it encourages people to each nation to think they need, they call it defense, but in fact it's more aggressive than that, to attack other nations, And I think George Orwell had it right in 1984 when he talks about this, where people turn phrases into the opposite, that the Minister of War is really the Minister of Peace, and the Minister of Justice is really the Minister of Injustice. So these various aspects that have come through, and are very much important today. And I think people like yourselves and other your organizations, other people who joined in throughout the globe, do envisage a different type of society which we can love each other. We can be a society based on mutual aid and on freedom.
I suppose the reason as you know, I now live in France.
Yes.
I've watched the whole Brexit horror show from a French perspective.
Yeah.
And the populism that you talk about that was whipped up by the Conservative Party, to me, it's false populism. It's false nationalism.
Yes.
It doesn't take the interests of the real Irish people or the Scottish people or the Welsh people.
No.
And one thing I'm amazed at in France is how actually decentralized power is, and how local communities keep going. My little village here, 12th century, in La Creuse, it used to be part of the Angevin Empire. Kings come and go, but the village carries on. It has its little church, its farming, and I think France is covered. And also each region has its unique flavor. So Brittany is very proud of its Celtic origins and so on.
Yes.
And you've been to Carnac,
Yes. Yes, I mean, so rich in that megalithic structures or stones. So I call them stones to the sky.
Yes.
And actually they're drawing up the energy of the earth and energy of the sky.
Yeah.
And the certainly in Brittany, it's very rich, as you say, and it's a very much a local culture and society. Although it has links, obviously, with Cornwall, the language, and in Wales and Ireland and Scotland. But on the west part, where the Romans didn't arrive, and the Anglo-Saxons didn't arrive, that you find very flourishing cultures today. Also in northwest Spain, Galicia.
Yes.
That's equally Celtic.
Yes. Well, I discovered when I moved to France, I found a map. There's a map of all the Celtic dolmens all over France, these standing stones. And there's thousands of them. There's many more than people realize throughout the whole of Gaul. They spread not just in Brittany, but all of Gaul. There's loads around me. And there's this map. Of course, the French are quite academic, so they've scientifically researched it all. And you know, because Gaul, the whole country, was a strongly Celtic, highly civilized culture before Caesar came and conquered it in the name of pride and arrogance.
I understood that under Napoleon, that he centralized things, and they claimed that all the roads in France, like the roads in Italy, go to Rome. In France, they go to Paris. But no less, there are people resist that and see a decentralizing force.
Well, a lot of people didn't agree with Napoleon's centralizing force, as you know.
As a military man, also, so that military men want to centralize. Same today in China.
He was resisted in the West, Napoleon. In the west of France, they didn't want his.
No, La Vendée, I think they.
But the later Napoleon III, who was a bit of a, you know, he was a failure as a military man. He lost to Prussia, but he did one good thing. He founded the Musée Archéologique de France.
Did he? Yes, yeah.
Which is in Saint-Germain. It's in the castle where the old King James II, was given refuge when he was kicked out of England. He came to Saint-Germain, which is just outside Paris. And he had this whole castle to the Jacobite court. And I think the Comte de Saint-Germain, the esoteric guy, was attached to St. James's court, King James's court. And now that's been turned into the National Archaeological Museum of France.
Yes, that's good.
I don't know if you've been, but it's worth a visit.
Yes, it's a great. And also, obviously, there's a lot of imperial beauty from Egypt and from Greece, ancient Greece. But some of the when Napoleon when the French went to Egypt, for instance, they did manage to, despite the military leaders, they recorded some very interesting aspects of ancient Egypt, which was sort of excellent there, and we can see it today to that degree.
Yes, I think Napoleon was torn. He was part military guy. He was also an intellectual.
Yes.
He was a Freemason. He was very interested in the mysteries.
Yes.
And a lot of his soldiers were Freemasons, the generals. In fact, every single senior marshal in Napoleon's empire was a Freemason.
Yes.
And in Egypt, they set up a lodge of Isis. And when they came back to Paris after they were kicked out of Egypt, they set up this lodge of Isis, which all the theatrical people, the actors and the playwrights of Paris joined. And the whole thing was like a theater pageant. They all dressed up as Isis and Osiris and did their rituals. And the French love all that. That's why the Holy Blood and Holy Grail has, you know, these esoteric French people all like to dress up to be Isis. And
I think it was in the 18th century in France, the Age of Reason, they were considered quite Freemasons were considered quite revolutionary, their lodges. And in fact, today I have my first wife's brother. He joined a lodge, and he he says that they're also not just confined to women. In fact, they're confined. They're open to women, not just confined to men, open to women. And he himself is from the West Indies. His parents were.
Right.
And so therefore, it's quite liberal in that sense. And but it does carry on very much the tradition of they still have this sense of strong moral compass, and they still also I think carry on important aspects of alchemy and ancient esoteric wisdom.
Yes. Is this brother-in-law French? He's in the French.
He's French. Yes, he's born and bred French.
Yeah, no, I've experienced, because I'm a historian among many other things of Freemasonry.
He comes from he lives near in the south. Yeah, Montpellier.
Right. Yeah. No, the southwest. Yes, there's a lot of
Montpellier.
Yeah. No, I've done a book on esoteric Freemasonry.
Yes, you know it's more. Yes, more. I've done a book on alchemy, but you know more about Freemasonry than me. Yes.
Well, you know, we're all beginners because it's difficult to access. But I've spent time in the libraries of the Grand Orient in Paris.
Yes. Yeah.
I went round again recently. The museum there, the Musée de Grand Orient, is an incredible place to visit, and it's open to the public. It has information about the Lodge of the Nine Sisters, who were 9 muses which were operating in the 18th century, and the opening, the grand hall where you go into the museum, it's only €5 to get in, is a spiral made up of the letters of every single alphabet in the world, starting with writing, the cuneiform writing of Sumeria, then Egypt, and then Hebrew and Phoenician. And they spiral out from the center, and they're carved on wood. And it's about 30 meters square, this huge spiral. And what they're saying by that is that all languages come from one universal source.
Yes. But it's very, very internationalist.
Yeah.
As you say, the opposite of Brexit. It's all minded xenophobia. I think, but unfortunately, in France, that apparently you got with the National Front and Le Pen, that there's a rise of populism and nationalism. Yeah,
but it's only a small few people follow that.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. And
Macron went to the Museum of the Grand Masters of the Grand Orient. Macron went there himself.
Yes. Yeah.
So they still play a role in French society ethically.
Yes. But in a way, probably don't in Britain. Yeah.
I think in Britain we've misunderstood what Freemasonry is about. I think in Scotland they understand it better.
Yes. Well, it came from Scotland, didn't it?
Yeah. So the Scottish lodges are disappointed at Boris Johnson and the Tories.
Yes.
They're squandering our cultural capital.
Exactly.
And converting it into some kind of capitalism, you know.
Yes.
Whereas the whole point of Druidry and the ancient wisdom and Freemasonry was to have a social ethic of caring.
Yes.
Like Robert Owen said, the great Welsh cooperative founder.
Yes. Yes. By the way, he was a great friend. You mentioned I did a book on William Godwin.
Yeah.
He was a friend of William Godwin, a friend who also in particular admired Mary Wollstonecraft, who wrote the Vindications of the Rights of Woman.
Yes.
And so that circle, which were linked to that period, also knew about Blake and Thomas Paine. Later, next generation is Robert Owen, who obviously believed in cooperation and set up the Grand Consolidated Union.
Yes. No, Robert Owen, I used to live near where he's commemorated in Welshpool. I trained as a religious studies teacher at the Robert Owen College of Further Education.
Did you? Yes.
In Wales. And he became a spiritualist as well. He was always interested. He wanted like spiritual socialism.
Yes. Yeah.
Like the Fabian Society.
Yes. Yeah.
I still think is the way to go. You know.
I certainly think there's a room for that. I think the whole Marxist project trying to create some sort of centralized secular socialism was wrong.
Yeah. Have you heard of a man called Pierre Leroux, a French?
Yes.
He was an early communist who was a spiritualist and a Freemason and a Pythagorean.
Yes. Yeah.
He was mayor of my local town, Boussac.
Was he? Yes, great. Yeah.
There's a statue to him.
Yes.
He wrote against Marx. He said, Marx, you know, I love you, but you can't build society
No.
again if you get rid of all the ethics and all the spiritual codes and everything. We have to build it with people's conscience, and this idea that materialism can do it is just false.
Yes. But I think for the most the anarchist tradition, people do feel that there's a whole aspect of man. You know, bread is not enough alone. The bread's very important.
Yeah.
But beyond bread, there's a spirit, and we ought to cultivate that as well in a society which is more just and equal and free.
Yeah, and that's why a materialist society alone, it just ends up in egotism.
Yes.
And ownership. That's the only thing that matters, is how much you own, how many pots of gold you've got.
Yes.
That's the selfish and societies that turn in that direction. Sorokin, the great Russian philosopher of history and sociologist, who looked at altruism, Sorokin,
Yeah.
he was a friend of Kerensky in Russia, and then he fled, and he became professor of sociology at Harvard. He said that societies go in waves, so you have moments of great altruism and love and compassion, like in Tang Dynasty China, when they achieve great wisdom with Taoism and alchemy and all the rest of it.
Yeah, particularly Taoism, yes.
And then it goes down. They become vicious little violent city-states all fighting each other, and it collapses. Or some invaders come in, you know.
Or become very centralized.
They become
hierarchical, like the modern state in China. They tried to resurrect Confucius, but he himself wanted a hierarchical society, a centralized society. But of course, the Taoists, as you rightly point out, they very much believed being closer to nature and a decentralized society, where you could just hear a dog barking in your valley.
I heard a lecture by Vandana Shiva,
who
studied organic farming in India.
Yes.
She relates what you're saying to the destruction of the soil quality.
Yes.
When people bring in monoculture, this idea of the agricultural revolution, you just grow one crop to its match in any field.
And become dependent on foreign seed merchants and for fertilizer and seed, not actually creating yourself.
So I think you and Vandana would really get on. Have you met her?
I haven't met her, but I know of her, yes.
She gave a talk to the the Galileo Commission, which I'm a member of, with David Lorimer, and I do recommend you apply and join and get involved. What we're trying to do is challenge the materialist paradigm of modern science that says that only matter, only particles, only physics is real, and spirit is false. We're saying scientifically there's huge amounts of evidence that's not true. Things like experiences and telepathy, all these things can be proved scientifically. And so the ancients who knew this, who built Stonehenge and the temples of, Delphi and all the rest, they were much wiser. They were tuned into a sort of cosmic energy field that interconnects us all.
Yes.
That's how we're all one, if you want,
But as you say, the great problem, not only with Marxism and Bolshevism, is that it's rather crude atheism, but what's happening today with capitalism, that you get the same sort of atheistic version which prevails, and to such an extent, people say I exist not because I believe or because I'm part of nature or part of some sort of higher energy. They say I exist because I consume.
Yeah, I am
bad. The only way they feel they live is to feel they consume, and they want to see what dimensions, what people, their cars and their houses, their income. It's not. They're not so much interested in their development of personal development of individuals, and whether they are actually contributing to the community.
Yes, we've changed Descartes' immortal words. I think, therefore I am too. I want, therefore.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Which is not man. This is a false Homo economicus.
Exactly. And you can see it very much in what Western medicine, say, compared to Indian medicine, Ayurveda medicine.
Sure.
It's all focused on the body.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Whereas I've studied to a certain degree Ayurveda medicine, and they often in modern India they combine both, but they actually important, and certainly ancient did, and before they did any operations or any cures, they would try to meditate. They do a certain amount of yoga. They would trying to clarify, to clear the body of sort of negative energies, and it's a much profound experience, really, I think, than what we just go along and get another pill.
No, it was looking at the whole human being and that spirit, body, soul. We're all one interconnected energy field, and that's what we're doing in the Scientific and Medical Network and the Galileo. It has
much more holistic. People are reacting to the sort of 19th century paradigm, and it's becoming much more holistic, that considering the whole, and that's true both of the individuals, but also true of the planet.
It is ironic because I did my PhD, the history of the Cold War.
Yes.
I looked at Russian philosophy and dialectical materialism in great detail.
Yes.
I think actually dialectical materialism had some good ideas about it. You know, they weren't pure materialists in the way that the modern capitalist scientific.
Lenin was a problem, and he interpreted it as a very heavy one-sided aspect.
Well, I've just seen the film Reds. Have you seen the movie Reds about John Reed?
I've heard of it. Yes, I know that. Yeah.
It's an epic biopic. It's got Gene Hackman in, Warren Beatty, and Nicole Kidman. It is an epic.
Yes.
You know, those were stirring times.
Yes.
But I think my point is the irony of history. Hegel said that history moves in dialectics. It doesn't move in a straight line.
Yes.
So the West opposes dialectical materialism, and yet here we are. We're all now materialists, capitalists.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
We even lost the dialectic with the sophistication. When I went to Russia and spoke to Russian philosophers in 1990, the intellectual caliber of those intellectuals was way above what you would get in the average English university studying philosophy. They were proper intellectuals.
Russians I have met, they were much aware of these philosophy, literature, of music, and in particular classical music.
Yes.
In a way, we should say in the West, it's completely lost, and so it's very interesting. Also, of course, in Russia, there's produced not only Bookchin, a great, but he was an anarchist, I suppose, materialist as well, but also Kropotkin.
Correct.
Yeah. And in particular, in the Ukraine, which is part of the Soviet, part of Russia, the Soviet. There was a very strong anarchist movement under a man called Makhno, who inspired the others. And he is fine. Lenin was fine with them to attack the whites, but once they attacked the whites and got out for the Western influence, they then the Reds attacked the anarchists. So they attacked everyone. It was liberal or on the Mensheviks on the right, if you like, and the long-standing aristocracy. But then they started to attack anything on the left. You can see the same sort of process happening in the French Revolution. So, also in a way, in the English Revolution in the 17th century, same thing happened with Cromwell, who in the end crowned himself as an emperor, like Napoleon.
Well, this is what Hegel.
So we have to be very careful, I think. That's why I'm always in support of a more libertarian socialism, not this authoritarian version, which in some ways, although is well-meaning, as you said, Marx, it became a sort of red fascism.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, under Stalin, it was abysmal. I mean, horrific what they did.
Yes.
So exactly. I think as a philosopher for peace, what I've been trying to do, a bit like you, is trace ideas back to their source. I'm a historian like you, and see if we can correct the mistakes that were made by previous generations of intellectuals, so that we can make it come right now.
Yeah,
it's a sort of medical work, actually, trying to trace the wrong thinking back to source and correct it. sort of planetary psychiatry, you could call it. I
Well,
think
certainly, actually, I'm a so-called historian of ideas. I was trained in that. That's where I did my BA and PhD in it.
yeah,
That was my PhD was research into William Godwin's philosophy and his development. And which later that became a book, but it was my first book. But I think it's very important to trace things to their source, as you say.
right.
And this intellectual history of ideas.
Yeah.
So it's a massively important to understand what's happening today.
Yes, no,
Otherwise, you become adrift. If you don't understand this ancient history, or even recent history, you
Yeah.
become adrift. And that's a very important way to interpret things.
yes, yes. And who was your supervisor at Sussex University?
He was a chap called John Burrow.
Right, right.
So he's dead now, but he did a very interesting book called The History of Histories.
I
Towards the end.
bought that book. I read it at night sometime when I can't.
Do you? It's a matter of time. But he wrote that just before he died.
Yeah,
And he was married to a very woman who was an artist. So I suppose that comes through to some degree. I think he'd been a student of a man called Plum in Cambridge.
right.
But lots of these people came down when they first set up the University of Sussex.
Yeah.
By the sea, because they wanted to have a new way of thinking, and also it's very much organized into schools, like you were saying, sort of quite holistic. So you could do various different subjects within a large school.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I had a lot of friends and lecturers who were socialists, who were artists, and I did a book of Ruskin with Clive Bell, who one of the brilliant old man who found the Bloomsbury group. Anyway, they were in psychology and so on. So it was very much interrelated, and I against the over specialization. So where you just do one subject.
Yeah, yeah. And what years were you doing the PhD at Sussex? Was that in the 60s or 70s?
No, it's early 70s. I went down there to an MA in about 1970. Then I stayed on to my PhD. After that, I was involved with. I did lots of extramural teaching, like you did. That thinking that knowledge should be much more beyond the walls. There should be not just universities.
Right.
And then I had also art college. I was taught at Chelsea Art College, and then after completing my PhD, I was with some friends. We set up a commune in Buckinghamshire, which still exists, called Redfield.
Okay.
Based on the libertarian and voluntary principles.
Yes, I've heard of it. It was famous. Yeah.
Yes. In fact, they did.
And so when
sorry?
my mother taught at the University of Sussex at that same time.
Did she?
She was in the School of European Studies.
Yes, I may have known actually. Even. Yes.
Eileen Daffern. Yeah.
Yes.
She pioneered the idea of having A-level and O-levels in European studies.
Yes.
He was a French scholar, a French teacher, and a socialist. And of course, they shut everything down. You can't do a European studies A-level in Britain.
Can't you? No, shame. I think
They
they don't say within intellectual history ideas as it works nowadays.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is the trouble with the British elites, like Johnson. Yes. They're not intellectuals. They're pseudo-intellectuals.
Yes.
They have the gloss of a smattering of learning. They get it eaten. But then they spend the rest of their lives preventing people thinking.
Thank you.
You know,
yes.
The British conservative tradition is very anti-intellectual.
It is. It's very anti. Yeah.
I blame Wordsworth. I think Wordsworth, he wrote banal poetry. Keats and Shelley complained, and he sold out. He became conservative.
Yeah, and also all his later poetry, the best poetry is early poetry in Wordsworth's case.
Right, when he had an affair with a French woman.
Yes, went to France. Had a child, I believe, as well.
He did, but then he became just a bland supporter of the status quo.
He actually was quite influenced as a young man by William Godwin in radical thinking. They turned totally against it. Just for the private feelings and wandering around on his own in nature. Lake District.
I think there's still something salvageable. My daughter's doing a PhD on Wordsworth at Cambridge on pilgrimage and poetry, and she'll find something good in him to redeem him.
I think the preludes work as well. But they were also friendly with Coleridge. And Coleridge also became a very interesting man. He introduced a lot of German philosophy, like Kant in particular.
Yeah, I'm a great fan of Coleridge as well. So
yes,
I left school at the age of 15 to become a wandering poet. Inspired by all these romantic poets.
Yeah. Shelley, probably Shelley's the greatest.
Yeah, Shelley. I wanted to be a latter-day Shelley, and I think that's what got me into Druidry when I read Grey Goddess. Yes, I saw the link between the Druid and the peace protester, the radical, and the philosopher.
Yes. Well, I think with the case of Shelley, not only wonderful poetry, but he was quite, for the whole of his life, was dedicated to radical ideas, and he but at the same time he went beyond a sort of atheistic view. Yeah. He obviously he talked about the necessity of atheism early on for his first pamphlet, that I think Oxford was sent away from there. But he later on became much more influenced by Plato and also a spiritual worldview.
Yeah, he matured in the right way.
Yes, and he could die before he's 30.
Yeah, it's a shame he didn't live a bit longer. He would have been a great.
Yes, great thinker. And I think, as I tell you, it was his wife, Mary Shelley. She had unfortunately they lost all of their children, but she and Shelley had Percy Bysshe Shelley had one child, and she said, I want to send him to Harrow to make him think like everybody else. And became a Tory MP.
Oh no!
Yes, and then he was the end of the line. He didn't have children, and then he went down to Bournemouth. You guess you could see that buried there in the cemetery. But it did take. I suppose his great action was to take Godwin's bones and William and Mary Wollstonecraft's bones down, and there they are in Bournemouth Cemetery.
I think I've seen them. Yes.
Yes.
That's a sad story, but I've got some good news before we come to the poem, which I'm looking forward to hearing. I have a cat called Bishy, who's named after Shelley.
Bishy, nice.
So Bishy lives on here in France.
I hope he inspires you. I hope she inspires you, or he does.
She is my great companion during this lockdown. She's been
your muse.
Your
muse.
Yeah, my friend. I think we have cats so that we can talk to them. You know, they're real.
Yes.
So look. Let's get down to your poem, and because you are to me a sort of latter-day exemplar of that romantic resistance movement, and you've carried it now in Devon. So thank you for joining us and celebrating the solstice with us. So tell us the poem, and then any further thoughts you've got about, this time of year and the state of the world. It's the floor's yours.
Well, this poem was written when I went down with my companion to celebrate the summer solstice a few years ago in Stonehenge, and so it's about accounts really from that experience. So the title is called Stonehenge, Midsummer, early 21st century. We came at midnight, dark silhouettes gathering, drizzle and low clouds as usual. We wandered amongst the stones and quiet people and shadowy ghosts. And then apart on a low hill, we clambered into plastic bags to lie on the damp earth, dozing fitfully. Before dawn, it stopped raining. We came down to stones, the drumming had begun. Bemused, an owl, perched high on the stone, turned his head, unblinking in all the noise. Druids in flowing robes leant eagerly on their staffs, their faces illuminated with new life. Amongst the stones, the expectant crowd surged forward, and then it arose above the horizon. The drumming and shouts reached a crescendo. The sun caressed the stones with white gold, aligned as it had been done for thousands of years. The world stood still. Stonehenge, the summer solstice. We left blessed and restored the rest of the new year.
Well, thank you. I can see that the visual images are very strong. You know, I was probably there when you went.
Because it was a very, very drizzly night, and then suddenly the sun came up. It was amazing, and the rain stopped.
I remember quite a few like that. That was probably when I was there. I was one of the druids in the robes, probably.
Well, you were probably one leaning eagerly on your staff.
Yeah. What year was that, do you think?
I think it's about, it must have been about, because I did it as part of, I think about 2005 or so, maybe later.
I may well have been there.
Yeah.
So our paths have crossed now and then. Yeah.
I saw you in your flying robe, and but didn't know it was you.
Well, no, but now we've met properly.
Yes.
Okay, so look, any further thoughts whilst we have you? What else would you like to say to the community?
Well, I was going to say that apart from my interest in anarchism, which obviously comes through my study of William Blake and William Godwin.
Yeah.
So I think they're both sources of great radical energy for us. And then I was a rather big, big tome which is still being in print and regularly bought. It's called Demanding Impossible, and it's a tradition of it's a study of what's called a history of anarchism, both in theory and practice. Appreciated by Chomsky and others as the main book on anarchism. But after those books, I just my first books after William Godwin was concerned about the socialist experiments, which were independent in the developing world. So I went to Tanzania, which was then in the area, and then into Cuba, which saw obviously shortcomings in both those cases, but mainly through coercion. But anyway, later on, after writing Demanding Impossible, I went around Africa to write a book on different boats. But the important book I wrote was called An Exploration of Ecological Thinking, which was called Nature's Web. And in America, it published as Rethinking Our Place on Earth. And in that, it's very much I looked at these great ancient wisdom traditions we talked about to some degree. Particularly the Druids is one of them, but also the great philosophers of Taoism, Hinduism, and Buddhism. And also there was a certain amount of Christianity, greening of Christianity. But then I looked at some more individual philosophers in the Western tradition who were concerned in particular about our relationship with nature, and to understand it's should not be one of domination or of conquest. And the last part of that book it talks about libertarian ecology, that how we should avoid as much as possible hierarchy and dominion. And the belief we should get in Genesis, that somehow nature is made for us, and we can replenish our numbers to any extent, and the whole of nature is made for us, and we can do anything like it. Then later, I wrote very much on my following book was very much about my own personal statement called "Riding the Wind," influenced by Taoism, obviously, but it was called the earlier editions were called A New Philosophy of a New Age, a New Era. Later, I called it as Liberation Ecology. So I've moved from libertarian ecology to liberation ecology. Okay. And that's really something which combines both deep ecology and social ecology, and a spiritual ecology as well, to a degree. And it looks at particular subjects like whether it's the joy of love or work through inaction. It's very much concerned. Obviously, quite a strong Taoist influence in there, and because I thought they were probably the closest to modern anarchism. And that's really then from then I obviously done these books on sailing, and Megalithic was my great next interest. Going even further into the ancient world, and then I combined a personal joy with sailing, and I tried to link this great voyage down from Scotland to Malta for my book on the megaliths, Europe's lost civilization. Then I've done one about it's called Poseidon's Realm, which I mentioned earlier. Very much looking at the ancient sites in Greece and recovering their deep understanding of nature and of the world and of each other. And I think it's very important altogether now that we see ourselves very much not separate from nature, but inseparable. And we are nature rendered conscious, and also not just human beings, but other beings in the world. And I would very much like to extend freedom and reverence for nature, not just to our species, but other species. As a result, I'm partly, I've been 50 years a vegetarian, so I'm now moving a bit towards veganism, because I think that there's been not only we do terrible things to each other, long-term things about man's humanity as a man, we still continue to do that, and particular to women, but there's also the cruelty to other species. And so my liberation ecology is concerned about the liberation of all beings and the being of being, and developing a sense of reverence for nature and understanding that there's no need to be so cruel and so dominating.
Well, can I comment a bit?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, no, I'm very pleased you've shared these ideas with us on this auspicious day. You remind me very much of Robert Hart, who was a good friend of mine. Robert Hart, who wrote a book on ecoforestry, forest garden.
Yes.
I did a sermon at his funeral when he died.
Did you? Yes.
I knew his forest garden in Shropshire. I visited several times.
Yes.
He and you were like blood brothers. Did you ever meet?
I never met him, no. But unfortunately not. But I have I tend to be sort of more on my own. But the other thing I would like to say is that we obviously, through forestry and other things, we don't develop a land ethic. It's very important to develop a sea ethic. And particularly when we look at the Earth's crust, 70% is sea.
Yeah. And
I just read today that climate change is destroying the Great Barrier Reef of Australia. And what we commonly think of the sea as a dumping ground, and particularly the microplastics. But I do a lot of sailing in the Mediterranean. I can see the terrible things happening there. I've gone right up towards Syria, and people do use it as a dumping ground. The fish have all been gone, been taken out, and they just throw bottles in it, and plastic and microplastic. So it's just a small microcosm, if you like, of what we're doing to sea as a whole. And so it's very important, obviously, to develop like Robert Hart. Is Robert Hart? Yes.
Yeah, Robert Hart. Yeah.
Robert Hart to develop, these forestry.
Called them. Yeah.
What's it called?
Well, he wanted forest gardens.
Exactly, forest gardens. And permaculture also is another great thing.
Yeah.
One of my interests from the age of 20 have always been having an allotment. And I've always never I've been one of the early organic gardeners. And I think permaculture, and before I moved here, I had about 4 acres. And I tried to help nature, if you like, to develop itself. But in fact, in some ways, it didn't need me at all, because it could get on with it. Like that. Now, we always think that we ought to interfere, or we should be even, I wouldn't say we should be even stewards. We should just be simply let it go in some ways, hands off. So, but the sea is a very important, people seem to think, because we live on land, people forget what's happening to the sea. And the climate change, which you mentioned earlier, and destroying the Great Barrier Reef, is a part of this whole cycle, of a changing atmosphere.
No, I agree. I don't think Druids can ever forget the sea. It's part of our soul.
Good.
And the Druids' sea god is Manannan Maclir.
Yes.
And it's very important in Iona, the west coast of Scotland, where I live. You're very conscious of the sea.
Yes.
What they believe is that when your soul dies, it goes to the southwest on the sea, and souls meet out at sea before they go to their past life reviews or wherever their next incarnation is.
Yes.
Soul gravitates to the sea, and that's where I think all the legends of Atlantis, Lyonesse,
yes,
from. They're deep in our unconscious minds. As Europe and Celts, we have this love of the sea. It's the meeting place of souls,
Yes.
And so, no, what you're saying about the importance of, I love your phrase, liberation ecology.
Yes. Yes.
I really think I take my hat off to you for that one. Because I've long
fine hats.
I've been long a fan of Murray Bookchin and his social ecology movement.
Yes.
I've been long a fan of Deep Ecology, and because I set up the Global Green University as a sort of resistance think tank about these things, I think you really hit the nail on the head. If we can combine liberation ecology with the cutting edge of both deep ecology and social ecology, then, that's what people need and want.
Yes.
That's the children of today that are involved in XR and all their protests. They need a bit of intellectual guidance, and I think this is where your work comes in. So I really take my hat off to you. I would just pose one question, though, as a sort of supplement, because you did mention liberation ecology includes spiritual dimension, spiritual ecology. And
for me, yes.
Well, I think I just want to tease out that a little bit, because I think that's very important. And I've written a book called Enlightenments, a plural. I've coined the study scientifically of enlightenments, not singular. I think the reason we have these centralized states and the centralized thing is that they're premised on there's a shortage of enlightenment. Ours is the only system that can get there. Our religion is the way. You have to follow our path, our sacred text, our God, or whatever. And then you might get a little glimpse of it. Whereas if we have spiritual ecology and liberation ecology, then actually everybody's birthright is enlightenment, right? And if we have a decentralized world of enlightened sages, and whether we call ourselves Taoists or Buddhists or Druids or Christians is irrelevant. If we actually were each enlightened, i.e. ethically fully self-autonomous, self-conscious, and acting from heart in all our ethical decisions. So yes, we were not being violent. We were caring for nature. We were caring for each other, for the feminine. It seems to me that a peaceful world, an anarchist world, would be a world of enlightenment, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I think we ought to talk, when you talk about enlightenment, we should see it in a much older tradition of the 18th century. So the 18th century did very much, in some ways, the modern world is carrying on the 18th century enlightenment.
Yeah.
Which is, progress, technology, and somehow that through that and science, through that somehow make a better world. Yes. That project, I think, is failed. I think enlightenment, understood in the older tradition of the Druids and before that, is a link. It's a link, which I think religion actually means also. It's not only with the natural world, but some world beyond that, and it's very difficult to define. It's not necessarily a monotheistic God like Islam and Judaism, Christianity says. But it's a understanding that, as I said earlier, there's more to life than bread alone, and that we have to consider the whole person is really not physical and mental, but also spiritual.
Yeah.
And and we've been reduced to machines. That's a danger.
Well, that's the problem with our.
That comes from the 18th century view of enlightenment, not a wider enlightenment. Obviously, you're trying to promote, and it's enlightenment which you find in Hinduism and in Taoism and Zen and so on.
Sure. I think just to defend the 18th century a bit, I mean, some of the 18th century thinkers like Nicholas Bonville, Thomas Paine, William Blake, some of these thinkers were aware of the inner enlightenment.
Yes.
And they were much deeper than man as machine. That was La Mettrie, and that was only one strand of the Enlightenment in the 18th century.
I would agree, because I, of course, I've made quite a study of the Enlightenment, and I'm just saying that line of Dolbach and La Mettrie and so on, that's come through more to the modern world, and they've forgotten the deeper understanding, which you find, as you say, in Freemasonry and alchemy. People forget, for Newton, who described his world as a machine governed by certain laws, and that he spent most of his life as an alchemist.
Yes.
And the alchemists are concerned not just transforming matter, but they're concerned about transforming themselves. So there's just maybe external alchemy, but there's inner alchemy. So the actual experiment to transform matter will not work if you're not somehow purified, enlightened.
Absolutely. So yes, there's there's a wonderful expert in Chinese alchemy now who's teaching. He's British. He's
Yes.
gone off and learned it. They call it internal alchemy.
Yes. Okay.
And I think that alchemical streak is very important in Newton's work.
Yes.
I don't know that I've told you, but since we last spoke a year ago, I've written and published 3 volumes of a work called
Massive.
Philosophiae Religionis Principia Mathematica.
Great. Well, my hat off to you, because it also is also as a one. I mean, it's like a Sufi hat, but anyway, yours. But anyway, the mine's for my daughter. But that obviously been very productive and creative this last year. I haven't been.
Quite.
It's very important to develop that. Principia Mathematica is not simply the mathematical understanding of the world.
No, natural philosophy. So I've done a sequel to Newton. I've looked at, and I've coined this phrase religious mathematics. So what the book is, it's a very detailed study of why mathematics is actually a religious activity. And if we have religious mathematics, what would it look like? So I've gone into, so to go back to your phrase, riding the wind, which is a superb phrase. Yes, the spirit behind enlightenment is what the Hebrew or Arabics call the ruach. And earlier on this solstice, we had a wonderful Islamic Egyptian spiritual healer who works with spirit. And I asked her, what's the word? She said, ruach, which is the spirit, right? Now that's what the Taoists would call the wind. So when you say you're riding the wind,
yes,
you have to be aware of the subtle energies. You have to learn to discern the void.
Yes.
In Lao Tzu, great work, he says the sage pays attention to the void, not the 10,000 things. So that's being aware of the invisible realm. Well, what I've tried to do in my book on religious mathematics is I've asked the impossible question: how can we measure the wind? How can we measure the void? And because I'm being rather naughty, I'm saying to all these young clever kids that graduate and do degrees in maths, I'm saying, if you use your genius to start asking questions about spirit, soul, about the gods, and so I've set them a textbook. It's fun, and I sent details of it to the head of the Newton Institute of Maths at the University of Cambridge. I want these brilliant mathematicians to take this field seriously. because I think that until we actually get those brainy people to pay attention to the wind or the void or the ruch,
yes,
we won't be able to save the planet, because mere science alone, technocracy, won't do it. We need spiritual ethics in there as well. So
yes, yeah, I agree, and that's why I went on from study alchemy, and I did read a book called The Philosopher's Stone, study of alchemy. And I went around mainly India and China and ancient Egypt, but they're still living traditions. Those are dead now in the West to a large degree, but there's still certain individuals and certain organizations carried on. But it's how, to me, what come is how important it is to understand nature as something living. And I mean, when I went to this what they call Needham Institute of in Cambridge.
yeah, I know that. Yeah,
Yeah, Needham did a wonderful series of books called The Science and Civilization in China.
Yeah.
But he was very much an alchemist. I mean, very much. He talks about the importance of alchemy, development of early science. And I went to in China to the White Cloud Museum and spoke to the abbot. And he said that there were. And he said, we're all alchemists here. No, it's not unusual. And then he said, we're all concerned about, I said, how old do you think I am? He said, he said, I don't know. I said, you're a pretty young man. He said, I'm 120 years old. And,
120.
Sorry?
He was 120 years old.
He claimed he was 120. So I'm not quite sure, but I think I'm 120. But the point, I had to do it through an interpreter. But his point was, we're all engaged with, I think it's called Nedam, which are in alchemy, and again I went to University of Benares in India, which is now called Varanasi, that area.
Yes.
But was the old English name was Benares, but it's still called University of Benares. I met a professor there, and he said, and all around this like common room, with his other professors, with their various equipment of alchemy. He said, we're all alchemists. So he also said, we're concerned with the spiritual side of things, not just mechanical. And so he was a professor. He said, as far as he concerned, what's important was, which I think is a very, very profound statement, very common actually. But he said, right thinking, right action, and right speech. And we get those things. That's a great help.
Sure. Have you come across the work of Zosimus in your studies on alchemy?
Yeah, I have actually. Yes, a bit. Yes.
He has some.
He was a great Persian thinker, I think, or that towards that central.
Zosimus was from Egypt.
Yeah. Oh, so a big one, Zosimus. Yes.
Zosimus.
I think he was a great alchemist. Yes.
Yeah.
And he was I think of Zoroaster, but Zosimus is yes.
No, what I love about Zosimus, and Carl Jung writes about him in his dream visions.
Yes, yeah.
Analysis of Zosimus. He was one of the first alchemists. He combined and synthesized Christian thought and Jewish thought and Zoroastrian ideas with ancient Egyptian.
Yes.
He also knew the writings of Enoch, the books of Enoch, and he was aware of the Kabbalah. And he was a real polymath, Zosimus. And he wrote a book about the alphabet. He wrote a book with every letter of the alphabet, the Greek alphabet, A to Z, or Alpha to Omega.
Yes.
The whole book on each letter. And we've only got the letter Omega that survived.
Yes.
Arabic, because the Arabic alphabet, the Arabic alchemists loved Zosimus as well.
Yes, yes.
Looking for the complete book, Alpha to Omega. You haven't come across it on your studies, have you?
I have certainly come across Zosimus, and I talk about him in the section on Egyptian alchemy in the Philosopher's Stone. And I think he was based in Alexandria, I think.
Yes, he was there. Well, actually, near there. Yeah.
Near there. Yeah. Anyway, he was a very important person. I think the tradition which you see in the Neoplatonism, which again is very much continuation in Britain, but the Hermetica, who looked at the Hermetica.
Absolutely, yeah. That's
a wonderful thing. And even if you enter enter the cathedral of in Italy, in Siena Cathedral, you see a picture of Hermes Trismegistus, thrice blessed Hermes. And it comes from Hermetica.
Absolutely, yeah.
They carried on a lot, and also I went to once in my travels, I went to the Vatican, and I got permission to go inside the Vatican, and also into the catacombs. Inside the catacombs, which just below the altar to Saint Peter, that below that in the catacomb, the old popes, some of the old popes did, but the strata, geographical strata, also is historical strata. Right up there, also at the bottom, you can see that people Romans were practicing the Egyptian, eclectic Egyptian religion. So you see pictures of Isis and Hermes, and it's just under, what people don't realize, it's just under the great altar to Saint Peter. And that's huge.
On the walls, these frescoes, are they paintings on the walls? Frescoes?
Yes, very faded, but you can still see them.
And they're pictures of Isis and all that, right under the altar of St. Peter.
Yes, yeah. And it's based on this rather syncretic religion, which came through from Egypt, through Alexandria. Yeah. Zosima was part of that tradition.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm doing a commentary on the Hermetica as a scholar of religions, and I have a library ticket to the Vatican Library. I've studied.
Yeah. Well, you could ask them about it, because I think you can actually go through it into the back, into this back of the Vatican.
Well, next time I'm there. But what I did notice when I was in the Vatican Library, in the open shelves, the most well-read book in the entire library shelves was the Hermetica.
Yes.
They had the 3 volumes, and it was really well thumbed. You know, when you can see a book being well. Yes. The others were all crisp and clean pages, but the Hermetica, obviously thousands of monks and Jesuits have been reading this for.
They were a collection of writing from Hermes, so-called from Hermes.
Well, there is
it's a type of Neoplatonism. So very where they do believe in a god, but then there's much more to it than that.
Well, they actually are interested in the inner mathematics of God. I mean, I was influenced by that universalist tradition of perennial philosophy in the Vatican.
Yes.
The librarian of the Vatican, Stucco, he wrote a book called Perennial Philosophy.
Yes.
About this, and one of the cardinals, Cardinal Egidio, he sponsored studies into the Kabbalah and into Hermetica. Yeah. And of course, in Florence, they translated the Hermetica into Latin.
Yes.
They were good Catholics, but in the real meaning of the word, meaning universal.
Was that Ficino,
Marsilio Ficino.
Marsilio Ficino, yes. I've seen a bust of him.
Yeah, he ran the academy in Florence for a while.
Yes.
And these
part of the Renaissance.
Yeah. And you wrote a book about all this, didn't you? You found Rudolph the Emperor.
I also did that. Yeah, I mentioned that. That's also interesting, yeah. The great thing, part of that book was I went to Prague, and I met I think it was I called him Zed, but he called it Zadibras. He had a sort of esoteric library, which but he spoke fluently. I met him. He was dying, unfortunately, but he spoke fluently, partly through self-intuition. It was Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. And he used to, apparently down below, he's with the Soviet Communist Party, a printing press, and he above, way above, he behind closed doors, he would produce a few copies of these great alchemical texts, and he got his daughters to paint in the covers, and so he was a sort of living example of this great confluence of different influences from the ancient world. So he was very interested in Kabbalah, he was very interested in alchemy, and
I'm just having a thought as you're speaking. I'm just thinking, what if Moses Hess, Engels, and Marx had sat down with Joseph Dietzken, who coined the word dialectical materialism. He was a Catholic intellectual.
Right.
And what if they said, Marx, you know, we all love the Hermetics. Why don't we call it alchemical materialism? I'm just thinking if Marxism had been anchored on alchemical materialism.
Yes, which is dialectical, by the way. Yes,
which is the same as dialectical materialism. But if they'd had the courage to call it alchemical materialism, you know, I think the history of the world would have been different and much better.
Yes, yes. It was nice. It's nice to see that people are recovering some of these ancient traditions. You know? It's like including yourself and Therese, but also trying to make ecology liberation and trying to make mathematics religious as well, spiritual.
Yeah, they're all attempts, aren't they? It's like we're archaeologists working at, like Foucault said, trying to chip away at the coverings.
Yes.
The Greek word for truth is aletheia, which means uncovering. Heidegger wrote about the etymology of the Greek word aletheia. I agree with what he said. Truth is already there. Truth is enlightenment. You and I are enlightened. Everyone on the planet is potentially enlightened.
Yes.
We're just trying to uncover it to reach aletheia. And all these different techniques like alchemy, like Taoism and so on, they're medical attempts to uncover.
The Kabbalah,
Absolutely. Yeah. And Druidry and its love of.
Yes. Okay. So I think what you see a lot of that you see a lot of in the traditions of different traditions are underneath. They could be, but you're making them real. You're taking off the dross on the top to show, to shine through, and
they're all common underneath. So this is where
yes.
communism comes in. In a sense, it's the spiritual bedrock of unity behind all the difference.
Yes.
The irony is we can't get communism through materialism. We can only get it through spirituality.
Yes.
What sages have said all along, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
we hope that we get a more spiritual, sharing and loving and peaceful world.
Well, that's the plan. One of my visions for Stonehenge, I'll just end with this, is I've been proposing for the last 15 years, since I was chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Stonehenge. An old friend, an alchemist, a Hermetic master called George Fursoff, asked me to chair this inquiry into the Battle of the Beanfield. And you know, that was a symbol of the horror, sort of authoritarian state smashing peace-loving anarchist hippie types. You know, that's why it's symbolic to me. George is dead now, but I'm still chair of that. And one of the proposals was we should have a spiritual pilgrimage center somewhere near Stonehenge, like a Woodhenge type structure.
Yes.
Which spiritual pilgrims from all over the planet could come, and it would be open 24/7. You could stay the night there. You could have conversations like we're having. There'd be a central hearth for a fire. Bards could do their poems, songs, and you know, visiting Taoists or Hermeticists from Egypt could come and visit. Yeah. I'm sure that's what they had in the old days.
Yes, I'm sure they did. Yes. Also, great hospitality to strangers.
Yeah, because that's how
you want to learn from other cultures. Huh?
Yeah, you want to learn. The Druids were always wondering about visiting Greece or Egypt.
Yes.
Okay. So let's revive the Spiritual Pilgrimage Center, and you can come and be a speaker there. I'll invite you at the opening.
I'd certainly like to come along. Maybe as somebody there. Yes.
Okay. Can I finish with a poem of mine? You read a poem.
Please do, yes.
I'd like to give you a present back of a poem of mine.
Very kind of you.
And this is from my volume 5. I've published 7 volumes.
Right.
Because I told you I ran away from school to become a wandering poet. So I'm just a poet, really.
Still a poet. Still a bard.
Still a poet, yeah.
Philosophical bard.
Yeah. This poem is called Faith and Knowledge. It's number 690 in my opus. Faith and knowledge, like sea and the seashore, or the water and the containers. However much knowledge you have, you still need infinite faith. And however deep your faith, you still need knowledge to scan and spell it, to hack and to hold it by. some words to smolder it into flames, something burning underground like peat. And faith is the immutable oxygen of all true fire, all Buddha fires, all mind-cruising dakinis, imperturbable with their smiles, going about the healing of ancient pains. But it is the breath we live by, the invisible influx, the mind you cannot see, that the soul's made of. From that we work. Here we bear witness to his craftsman's tools of mind. Caught the speech, caught the spark, held the arc, layered torch to the key itself, the fine detail. And the gold of pure love was born. And the light was daring to get up and walk about, hiding in human forms. And that word was separated out and became the wheel of the mysteries again. Then knowledge looked up to sky of praise and said, look at what my hands have wrought, cities, fine medicines, planets and botanical gardens, loving, wooings, accountants, disco dancing dakinis, ocean going liners, space beings, all the libraries of the world, the whole wise web of worldly Facebooks, harmonizing and crisscrossing lines of innuendo and acclamation. Faith didn't say anything right away. She had to be searched for. But when she was found, she was sitting quietly alone in a place of great harmony, and strange numinosity was shining all around her. The people were silent and listened. A sudden wind stirred the first leaves of autumn. At the end of thought's fall, each of them heard their hearts beating. In that moment heard their thoughts falling like petals against the background space that became entranced and grew and shaped a universe into being, became a sharp defining judgment, became a term, became the light behind from which all things are formed and forged, became a story of a child, a story of how faith and knowledge finally blended, merged, and rose in love, and then ran on and did, were action.
Great, well done.
Okay, it's a sort of, it's a complex poem, but I wanted to give you one back, and that's the page it opened at. So
Thank you very much. And also,
yeah,
you say we have to combine faith and knowledge in some ways.
yeah, and transform it into action, you know.
Yeah, ideally, yes.
So thank you so much, Peter, for our talk this morning and for joining in the Stonehenge Peace Festival for Midsummer. Have a great Midsummer yourself.
Yes.
And say hello to your partner, Elizabeth. She's a photographer, is that right?
Yes, but also a bit of a poet, and she's mainly a photographer, yeah.
Excellent.
She used to teach photography at university, but now she's retired, obviously. But as you joined me in my various travels,
right?
Recently, my second companion away, and but I just say it's been a pleasure to be with you and to talk with you. I hope to sketch some things. It's wonderful to share another poem.
Excellent. Okay.
Very relevant to what we're discussing. I do think it's important that we carry from the Midsummer to the best festival of Stonehenge, carry on this sort of blessed and restores and renews state.
Yeah. Okay. Bless you. Thank you so much, Peter, and keep up the good work.
And you as well.
I'll see you in Delphi when we have the Delphic Games.
One day, I hope so.
Okay.
My boat is up in Onion, so I can come through probably the Canal.
You can park quite near Delphi.
Yes, I have. I felt I have done. There's I can't remember the name, but there's a Trigonia, I suppose. But there's you can walk up. You see a lot of flats. You go out towards stuff.
Okay. The only thing we haven't talked about just in the last couple of seconds is, I mean, I've set up this thing called the International Commission of Inquiry into the etiology of COVID-19. I'm interested in its medical origins. You know, is it a natural thing? Is it designed by humans? Is it biowarfare that's leaked? Do you have any information or views?
Well, it's just that my son has just come back here. He used to teach in the Philippines. He very much believed that it escaped from this institute in Wuhan of virology and infected the world.
Yeah.
There also, I mean, initially I was quite drawn to the idea that the partly because of my vegetarian interests, that it seems to be this virus is actually in the droppings of bats, and they were talking about the pangolins, which are a type of animal, which each was suffering around the floor and under the bats, and they may have become infected. And humans start to eat, Chinese in particular, they eat pangolin as speciality. I think it's got medicinal purposes, and that's why it may have developed the wet market. It seems that there were quite a few people in November 2 years ago were infected, and it seems like it may have been a leak from this institute. So I don't have any settled opinion, but it seems that it could be that, or I know around the world they have terrible biological weapons which they're developing. For instance, I knew that Russia, smallpox be wiped out. They still keep in some sort of file in Russia and America, smallpox. And obviously the Americans gave it in on blankets to the local population. But they still maintain smallpox. But also, even in Britain, Scotland down, they developed these terrible biological weapons.
Yeah.
And whether that's a leakage from the institute, I don't know.
Well, I'm trying to find.
What's your view?
Well, I'm suspending judgment as the chair of the commission. I'm looking at all the evidence from all sides.
Yes.
And I'm not going to make up my mind till all the evidence is in.
Yes.
I've been in touch with virologists all over the planet.
Yes.
And I'm going to weigh the evidence scientifically and ethically.
Yeah.
You know? But if you come across people with theories, like your son can email me.
My son's been he felt very strongly with virology.
Well, if he has,
he's been living in Southeast Asia, and for some time he was teaching in Japan, and now he went down to Philippines.
Right.
And he knows the area quite well.
Okay.
But he's quite. We had a discussion about it yesterday.
No, ask him to email me. Send him my email. And
Okay. I'll ask him to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Right. Okay. So on that rather sober end, we should. Your partner wants you for lunch, I suspect.
Is that right? Say hello.
Hello, Thomas.
Yeah. Hi. Greetings. Yeah.
Nice to you.
Hello. We've had a good chat, and thanks for being there and looking after him. You're a great couple.
I don't know that. I'd look after her a bit. But,
Elizabeth, you have a poem you could read us. Can you finish with a poem of yours? Do you have one?
Have you a poem? I said you're a poet. Well,
Okay, I have to find it. Just a second.
no, not necessarily the one. Well, it's relevant. But,
Oh,
It's in your hat, Peter. Is that a dragon? You seem to have a.
yeah, here it's a. This is given to by my daughter. It's a Yorkshire cloth cap, and in the corner here, the one who makes it, it's a kingfisher.
Oh, okay, a kingfisher. That's very nice.
I
Yeah.
don't know whether you can see it, but I can hold it closer. It's a metal kingfisher.
I thought it was a Welsh dragon.
It's also a pendragon.
Yeah.
I'm afraid it's in, but it carries on the same tradition.
Okay.
I did once write a poem about the importance of the man goes to the north and burnt by a dragon. His dragon's fire, and he comes back, and he's got scars all down his face.
Ah.
And the title of the book was about the skin, about scars. That title of the poem. We all, in a way, we all have scars as you reach a certain age. You have a scar on you. It doesn't, but it's part of your experience. Was it visible or internal?
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway,
Let's Elizabeth.
could be, but the also I feel that dragons got a very bad press, because in particular in Christianity, it's Saint George who's on his horse killing dragon. The dragon is really, for me and probably for you, is the earth's energy.
Sure, it's the Gaian force field that live.
So they're trying to, he can't, but he's trying to kill the earth energies.
Well, somebody once explained to me, if you look at the iconographic art of Eastern Orthodox Christianity, the dragon is not actually ever really being killed. It's more an homage. If you look at it as an art historian, the St. George is homaging the dragon. And in fact, he doesn't kill it in a violent way. He sort of tames it and works with that energy.
That's good. Lots of Greek, Byzantine, churches, chapels. They have that figure.
Yeah. So Georgos is the earth worker. My father was called George. The George tradition works with the dragon energy for the healing of the planet.
Good. I hope that's the case. I was a bit concerned that in part of this Christian domination of nature, I still think it's not.
We claim it for the goddess tradition. Also, the same set of Apollo. You see, the Delphic oracle was set up because Apollo reputedly killed the great Python, the earth dragon.
The Python. Yes.
Actually, he didn't really. He just tamed it and used it for oracular and healing purposes.
Yes. Yeah.
We're going to have plays about at Delphi in the Delphic Games about Apollo and Gaia making a peace treaty.
Good idea. That'd be amazing. That'd be fantastic.
Good. Okay.
I pass on the list now.
Thank you. Let's.
Very nice to talk to you.
Okay, bless you. Thanks so much, Peter. Let's have.
Let's
Finish.
You're right, Titi.
Fine.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Hello. This poem is not about the solstice. It's about lockdown. Was that okay?
That's very relevant. Extremely relevant. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's called Time Slows Down Under Lockdown. Shifting, sifting, slowly, slowly, separating stone from soil, separating plastic debris from sticks, crumbling earth and plucking out root. Fingers coax the matted earth into fine compost. A mulch is now ready for the new beans. Sifting, shifting, slowly, slowly, taking out contents from the cardboard box, favourite books and those forgotten, a lifetime of reading and thinking, crumpled pages, faded illustrations, books to be rejected, others to be cherished for their wisdom. A fine library is formed. Shifting, sifting, slowly, slowly, coloured balls of wool are threaded into patterns and morph into known shape and form. Ruby red, blackberry puce, cornflower blue transform into two-dimensional flowers on a pale fawn background. A winter sweater comes to life, the one I'm wearing. Shifting, sifting, slowly, slowly, a lifetime of photographs taken in far-off places with different partners demand attention, large format, medium format, images captured, too long silenced in portfolio and neglected. Sifting, shifting, slowly, slowly, a case of diaries, a page a day over a lifespan of 90 years. My mother's world recorded, intense and truthful to her, revealing and perplexing for her daughter to see her youth displayed in the intimacy of my old age. Shifting, sifted, slowly, slowly, we've been told to hurry, to take life by the horns. We want it now, we want it all, like spoiled children, no longer savoring life's flavors. We have taken on too much, without sifting, without shifting. Shifting, sifting, slowly, slowly, coronavirus forces us to stay at home. Unseen, it came slowly, then like a broken oak, it snapped into our lives and forced us to change. No browsing in the shops, no coffee in the cafe, no hug from friend or family. Shifting, sifting, slowly, slowly, the old, the frail, the carers die. Deadly droplets invade, hang on, infect, and sneak into the lungs. The killer is the modern plague. No seen enemy, it moves silently, without sympathy, to innocence. Shifting, sifting, slowly, slowly, the news fills our head with fear. Tabloid headlines create anxiety, insecurity. Politicians show their true colors, grasp at privilege. One rule for them and one for us, still swept into the fast stream of life. Outside on our lane, a nurse wears a protective mask. Young people bring home deliveries to our gate. Shifting, sifting, new challenges, heartbreak and sorrow will bring out resilience, moments of tenderness remembered, humor savored, generosity appreciated, communities with kindness organize and protect. Shifting, sifting, slowly, slowly, in my garden, new potatoes emerge into the light, radishes rush into leaf, and roses blush with scent and color. The pear tree, back in April, groaned with blossom. In June, a carpet of blackened fruit lies on the ground like beached tadpoles. Sifting, shifting, slowly, slowly, coronavirus has imposed its rhythms. Success and failures weave around us. For some, this virus has shattered, numbed and broken. For others, slowly, slowly, shifting and sifting have given new thoughts to make a difference, heartfelt, humbly, to respect the young and thank those who put their lives at risk.
That's an epic.
Sorry about the length.
No, I have a feeling that's the first part of an epic. Try a Wordsworthian approach and do the epic of the virus testimony. We don't know where the narrative's going next, but let's hope that it's going in a positive direction.
Definitely.
Yeah. Have you two had your vaccination? Are you going to? Or
Oh, yes, yes.
you both had it? Yeah.
Yes.
How about you?
Have you?
Not yet. No, not here in France. It's the least affected part of all France, so it's not a priority really. If I want to travel elsewhere in Europe, I will have it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we traveled in the autumn last year to Greece, which we were able to do, which we were very fortunate. So we spent 6 weeks in Greece in the autumn. And we hope this year to go back to Greece in the end of August, September with our vaccinations. We would like that.
Sure. Well, if you go to Delphi, I'll put you in touch with some people, or Athens. And you can have some discussions about this Delphic Games. I don't know if you heard my talk with Peter about that.
Just very briefly.
Okay, so we're trying to revive the Delphic Games. A colleague of mine in Berlin, Christian Kirsch, runs the International Delphic Council. And we've got contacts all over Europe and all over the world to make it the equivalent of the Olympic Games, but in the worlds of art, culture. So poetry, music, theatre, dance would happen at the Delphic Games instead of physical prowess sport. And there'd be discussions, philosophical debates, that kind of thing. And this used to happen in Delphi for 1,000 years. It was part of Greek culture. And Pindar, the great Greek poet, wrote lots of odes for it. They're called the Pythian Games, or the Delphic Games, and we're reviving it. So
That's magical. Very, very good idea.
It's going to happen. So you two are invited. You look like a Pythian Sibyl yourself. I'm sure you can, you know.
But we visited Delphi. We visited it, and we had a very special moment at Delphi because, you know, there's an eagle. There's supposed to be an eagle that comes down there. Well, we actually saw an eagle there.
Right.
And what was quite strange was that there was the Olympic Games on at the same time.
Yeah.
And in Greece. And so when we went to Delphi, there was nobody there. Virtually, we had the place totally to ourselves because everybody was watching the Olympics on the telly.
Right.
It was very special.
In 10 years' time, they'll all be watching the Delphic Games on the telly.
Yes.
And they'll be listening to poets and theatre people and dancers. And, you know, why not? Let's prove that humanity has more to us than just physical prowess. That culture is important, the arts. This is what we shouldn't lose sight of, because that comes from our soul, our spirit. So, okay, with those final thoughts, I will say adieu. Thank you to both of you for sharing.
Oh,
on
Peter.
this.
Peter's just coming to say adieu.
Adieu, adieu, mon ami. Adieu.
Adieu et enchanté, as they say in France.
Enchanté.
Je parle français.
Ok, c'est bien.
J'aime bien la France. Oui.
Félicitations et toutes les bonnes idées.
Oui.
And keep up your souls with good strength. Okay.
And to
Et
you.
toi aussi, hein? Toi aussi.
Merci bien et bonne solstice.
Okay, d'accord. Bonne continuation.
Au revoir.
Great.
Au revoir.
Thank you. Thank
Adieu.
you.
Au
Nice
revoir.
to talk to you. Au revoir.